everyone. My name is Jayesh Tekchandaney, and today we will go through the process of predicting the marriage, the exact date of marriage, using the principles of KP astrology. One important thing as we proceed with this presentation, it is very important for anybody who is watching this video and wishes to make the prediction of the date accurately. There are certain things that you need to know. One has to be well versed with the basics of astrology, planets, zodiacs, houses, nakshatras, dashas, planetary system. One has to be well versed with the fundamentals of KP astrology. You should know what a KP Lagna and a KP Cusp chart are. Understanding of planets, Rashi Lord, that's the ruler of the zodiac, the nakshatra lord, which is also called the star lord, the sub-lord. Understanding the concepts of Cuspal sub-lord and their significance. Understanding house grouping in KP astrology and house significators. The concept of ruling planets. Above all, to make an accurate prediction, you need to be either very good at calculations yourself, or you should know how to use a good astrology software, and there are many of them available. So the first thing is that we need to cast a horoscope, and to cast any horoscope, what is the information that we need? So we need the date of birth, the place of birth, and the exact time of birth. These are three important informations that we need. What we see here is the input which is kind of fed into the astrology software, and the Ayanamsa that we use is the KP Ayanamsa. The latitudes and the longitudes, again, those softwares will have these built in, and once you insert the place of birth, you will be able to get the horoscope. So yeah, that's what a typical output from a Krishnamurti Paddhati process looks like. So you see the KP Cusp chart and the KP Lagna chart, and how the two are different. As I said, these are the basics, and I expect those who are watching this video to have a good understanding of that. And what you also see is the table where the planet positions as per KP system, they are indicated, and the KP house division. So you see that each planet is in a specific zodiac, it is in a specific constellation that's called as the nakshatra lord, it is in a specific sub-lord. And again, this particular table, interpretation of this table, somebody who is well versed with the basics of astrology should be able to do it fairly easily. Let's understand how do we go about predicting the marriage using the KP system. So what do we actually mean by marriage? By marriage, it is meant that one or more member is added to the family, which is indicated by the second house in astrology. This addition is an agreement which is denoted by the seventh house, and such an additional member brings permanent tie of friendship, of pleasure and progeny, shown by the 11th house. This is why houses 2, 7 and 11 are to be considered while making prediction of marriage in KP astrology. And what does the output tell us? When you make a prediction, what do you really want to know? So the marriage, whether it is promised or not, the description of the partner, the time of the marriage, and the state of the marital life. Now, in this case, we will limit our discussion to whether there is a promise of marriage or not, and the timing of marriage. The text that you see here is borrowed from KP Reader 3, and that's a very good source. The KP readers are an extremely good source of learning KP astrology. So according to the KP system, marriage is promised if the 7th Cuspal sublord is a significator of houses 2, 7 and 11 that govern marriage. Venus is to be examined as it is the planet signifying marriage. Marriage will take place during the conjoined periods of significators of houses 2, 7 and 11 when the transits are in harmony. This is how we will go about making the prediction, and let's now start the process of making the prediction for the chart that we just prepared. So the promise of marriage, the Cuspal sublord and the significators. What we see here is marriage the promise of marriage is shown by the 7th Cuspal sublord. Now in this case, the 7th Cuspal sublord is Saturn. What does Saturn signify here? Now, Saturn is in the nakshatra of Mercury and in the sub of Rahu. And what we see is that the significator, Saturn is the lord of the 7th house and hence signifies that the 7th house of marriage. And the significators of KP, the KP significators for Saturn in this case clearly indicate that houses 7 and 11, which are required for marriage to take place. Now Saturn does represent these two, and Saturn being in the nakshatra of Mercury, which is the lord of the 11th, ensures that the fulfillment of desire is there. So the desire to get married is fulfilled. Thus Saturn signifying houses 7 and 11, which are significators of marriage, clearly indicates that Saturn here promises marriage to this native. One important thing that we would like to highlight, Saturn is known as the planet of delay. Now in this case, as you see, the native is born in 1987, and as at the time of prediction, that's the age of 33, the person was not married. So Saturn has actually caused delay in the marriage of this native. And as they say, Saturn delays but does not deny. So the next important thing is to identify the significators. What do we mean by significators? Well, KP clearly indicates what are the significators, and it also indicates which significator takes prominence over the other significator. So typically a KP software will generate a list of significators and classify them as A, B, C, D, E and F. A being the strongest of the significators, and as we move towards B, C, D, the strength of the significators come down. However, every significator that is indicated in this table, that's A, B, C, D, will take part, or will contribute to the marriage taking place. So, now let us identify what the significators here are. So, for the second house, as we see in the chart, Ketu is deposited in the second house. There is no planet in any of the 3 stars of Ketu, there is no planet in Ashwini, Magha and Mula. Sun is the lord of the second house. Sun is deposited in its own nakshatra or star, that's Uttarashada. There are no planets in the Kritika and the Uttar Falguni star that is also owned by the Sun. And therefore the significators of the second house are Ketu and Sun. Likewise, the significator of the 7th house is Saturn. The significators of 11th house are Mars, Venus, Saturn, Rahu and Mercury. So if you look at the combined list of significators here, that's for houses 2, 7 and 11, we have Ketu, Sun, Saturn, Mars, Venus, Rahu and Mercury. And what is important is that we need to identify which are the significators which are fruitful for marriage to take place. So yeah, here's where the concept of the ruling planet comes in, and that's the concept which is very unique to create the KP system. And the date of judgment, that is the date at which the prediction was made, was 26th September 2020, and the time of prediction was 23:18 hours. The place of prediction was Mumbai, and the ruling planets, and the ruling planets at that time were, the Lagna rising or the ascendant was Mercury. The moon, star lord was Moon. The moon was in the Rashi of Saturn, and the day the prediction was made was Saturday, so the day lord was Saturn. The Mercury was in the nakshatra of Mars at the time this prediction was made. So this is typically called as LSRD, and if I were to just kind of sum up, the Lagna, L is Mercury, S is Moon, R, the Rashi Lord is Saturn, the day Lord again is Saturn, and the rising nakshatra at the time was belonged to Mars. So the important thing here to understand is, in the KP system, ruling planets at the time of judgment must agree with the event. And we identified in the previous slide, the significators were Ketu, Sun, Saturn, Mars, Venus, Rahu, and the common significators, that is the significators for marriage and the ruling planets. We see that 3 significators are common, that is Mercury, Saturn and Mars. And the Dasha of these planets is more likely to give the marriage. That is how we have eliminated some significators for making the prediction. Next, what you see here is the Dasha. Now the Dasha at the time of the judgment, the native was undergoing a Saturn Dasha, and that Dasha goes on till the year 2025, that's April 2025. And as we identified that Saturn signifies houses 7 and 11, and we also saw that Saturn has a dual presence in the ruling planets. It was the Rashi Lord and it was also the Day Lord. Saturn is also the 7th Cuspal sublord, which promises marriage. Hence the Dasha of Saturn is a very strong significator of marriage, and she's very, very likely to get married in the Saturn Dasha. But the Saturn Dasha then extends up to 2025. So how do we now narrow down the period? So let's look at the Antar Dasha, or the so-called Bhukti. And the Bhukti that the native is presently running is the Rahu Bhukti, which goes on till 3rd of October 2022. Again, these dates are generated from the software, and as I said, a good software will give you all of this information very, very handy. And as we see that the significators of Rahu is a significator of the 11th house, and Rahu is the star of Mercury, which is the lord of the 11th house. So Rahu as well confirms that marriage will happen. So the Saturn Rahu Dasha is actually a good period for marriage to take place. And from 2025, we've now narrowed down to a period of 2022 October. And the next thing is now to further get more accurate and more precise on the date, and we need to see the Antra, or what is called as the Pratyantar Dasha. And the current Pratyantar Dasha that is going on, the current Antra that is going on is Saturn. Again, let us remember that Saturn is a very strong significator of marriage. It is the 7th Cuspal sublord. It is a strong ruling planet. And the Antra which follows Saturn is Mercury. Now the Saturn Antra goes on till early April 2021, and that's the period which becomes a very strong indication. So because of the strength of Saturn in the chart and the confirmation through the ruling planets, we have decided that the marriage is very, very likely to take place in the Saturn Rahu Saturn period. That is the Saturn Dasha, the Rahu Bhukti, and the Saturn Antra. Now, to further narrow down the date of the marriage and to make sure that the transits do agree with the Dashas, we need to look at the planetary transits during this period. And while we look at the planetary transits in this period, I would like to borrow an excerpt again from the KP Reader 5, where Shri KSK, Krishnamurti Guruji, he indicates that when a specific Dasha, that's when A Dasha, B Bhukti and C Antra operate, that part of the zodiac governed by these three planets will be transited by them. That is the planets which indicate the Dasha, Bhukti or Antra, or the luminaries. So Sun and Moon are the two luminaries, or the Lagna. And that's the rule that we will look to check, how the transits are in agreement with the period that we have, that is the Saturn, Rahu Saturn period. So when we started looking at the dates of the transits, we actually narrowed down, and you need a good software which gives you the transits here. And we first look at, because the event is likely to happen in a period of the year, the prediction was made in September 2020. And based on the Dasha, we see that within the next 1 year, the marriage is likely to happen. So the first thing that we look at is the transit of the Sun. And the Sun transits the zodiac of Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, and the Nakshatra, the Sanvishta Nakshatra, which is ruled by Rahu, typically in the period from 21st February to 4th March every year. So, based on the transit rule, we can now narrow down the date further, that the marriage is likely to happen between 21st February and 4th March of 2021. In this period, we will also look at the other transits. And if we look at the transit of Saturn, which is the Dasha Lord and the Antara Lord, Saturn is actually transiting its own sign of Capricorn in this period. So Saturn is actually transiting, its own sign, which is again ruled by Saturn. Rahu is transiting Taurus, owned by Venus, which is the Karaka of marriage. It is important to note in the natal chart that Venus and Saturn are in close conjunction. They are actually in 4 degrees of each other. So Rahu again confirms, the transit of Rahu confirms. We will now narrow down the exact date by looking at the transit of Moon. And if you see, Moon transits, the star of Saturn in the sign of Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, on 24th February 2021. So here the transit of the Moon in the star of Saturn also confirms that the date which we are now looking at is 24th February 2021, and that's what we will conclude. Now when we go on 24th February 2021, what we see is Sun on that day will actually be transiting the sign of Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, and it will be in the star of Rahu as well as the sub of Rahu. So the rule that we looked at, that when A Dasha, B Bhukti, C Antara operates, that part of the zodiac governed by these 3 planets will be transited by them or the luminaries, Sun and Moon, and the Lagna. In this case, we see the Sun is actually fulfilling the rule, and hence the date of 24th February 2021 can be very confidently predicted. Let's now look at what actually happened. And yes, the marriage actually took place on 24th February 2021, and the marriage time of the marriage was around 5 p.m. in the evening. And here is a chart which has been prepared on 24th February 2021 at 5 p.m. and you see the planetary transits and what we just talked about, in terms of the Sun is transiting Aquarius ruled by Saturn in the Sarvishta Nakshatra ruled by Rahu in the sub of Saturn. So the transit of Sun, through these, in this period controlling the Mahadasha, Antardasha and the Pratyantardasha, or as we said, the Dasha, Bhukti and the Antara. The Moon is transiting Cancer, its own sign, in the Pushya Nakshatra, again ruled by Saturn, in the sub of Mercury. Saturn, which is the Dasha Lord, is transiting its own sign Capricorn, in the Shravana Nakshatra ruled by Moon, in the sub of Jupiter. And Rahu is transiting Taurus, ruled by Venus, the Karaka of marriage, in the Rohini Nakshatra, ruled by the Moon and in the sub of Venus. And as I said, Rahu is Venus is in close conjunction with Saturn in the natal chart. So as the transit effects and the Dasha, Antardasha effects are in perfect agreement, the marriage took place exactly according to the rules enunciated by Krishnamurti Guruji and as stated in the Krishnamurti Paddhati. And this is an excellent example. I encourage you to take charts and apply the same set of rules. In many cases, you can also kind of validate these set of rules by looking at the date of events which have already transpired. When look at your own marriage and see how these particular rules fit in specifically to you. And I will see you again with many more videos in this series where we will discuss a lot of other predictions and how these predictions can be made simply using the KP astrology. And in case you need any predictions related to marriage, please feel free to contact me. My name is Jayesh Tekchandaney. My email ID is listed below. Thank you and see you again soon.